Hi guys, thank you for having me. Let me begin by introducing myself. My name is Baltazar Rodríguez. I work for IBM Mexico, and I'm the blockchain leader within Mexico. I'm also a technology evangelist, which is weird because I'm a Buddhist. But in any case, I usually speak about stuff like the blockchain, IoT, quantum computing, what have you. I mean, one of the good things about working for IBM is I get to play in a really big toy box. So before coming into IBM, I worked a long time ago. Actually met Agustin Aramburu, who gave a talk regarding automotive insurance. We actually met working in a telecom company, which is weird because this brings back a lot of memories, because this feels like when I started working in telecom at the very beginnings of the internet. Now, after working there, I switched over and went to work for the government. So I ended up being the Chief Technology Officer for the Mexican Revenue Administration, which basically means I was a technological taxman, and as it happens, I never made a lot of friends with that job. However, I did have a very huge opportunity in order to do business transformation, and that is where I actually learned how to use technology in order to transform business. When I started working for the Revenue Service, basically 98% of all transactions still happen in paper. By the time I left, it was 98% of the transactions happen in electronic format. I actually helped write the electronic signature law that governs Mexico right now. So basically that implies that whatever you do digitally, as long as it uses asymmetric cryptographic elements, it's legally valid. So that actually gives a very interesting legal framework in which to do stuff like blockchain, because it is automatically legally binding in terms of the law. I also managed to invent the electronic invoice. And one of the weird things is Mexico has the largest installed base of electronic invoices. Roughly, we got around 10,000 million electronic documents a year, and all of them are covered with cryptographic elements. And it's that love of cryptography that made me get really interested in terms of doing blockchain stuff. So when IBM started playing around with blockchain, I was actually one of the first takers. Now, that being said, I would like to comment also that I'm extremely grateful with you guys for having me over, because during this conference, I've seen an entirely different side of the coin. Because what I do within IBM is basically work with the incumbents. I work with the large insurance companies. And basically you guys are building brand new business models in order to try and disrupt that. So the other thing is, I'm probably the only guy, there was another guy, but I'm currently the only guy going to speak to you about Hyperledger. And that makes me feel like I walked into the wolf's den right here, because I mean, you guys are everything about Ethereum, and I'm everything about blockchain. Sorry, about Hyperledger. But the thing is, it dawned on me the fact that basically we speak about the same stuff under an entirely different light. Like, for example, the conversations I have with customers are very focused on things like consortia, networks. And I haven't heard consortia or network one single time today, which is weird, okay? So I do not think I'm going to do get any converts, but one thing we need to keep in mind, and this is something I try and live by also when I speak about my own technology, is, as Mark Twain said, any guy with a hammer, I mean, everything is going to look like nails. You get in love with your tools, and basically because of that love, you try and apply it everywhere, even if it doesn't apply. So the trick here, in order to do transformation, and this is one of the things that took me a long time working in the revenue service to understand, is that in essence, what you need to do is understand the business problem. If you do understand that business problem, then that will give you the leverage that you need in order to choose the appropriate tool. and to see how to actually apply it. Because if not, you're only pushing a tool and you're not generating value. You need to understand what it is that you're trying to solve. Thus, you need to grasp the idea of what's happening. And this is something that I've seen with the large insurance companies in Mexico and across the region in Latin America that is gaining a lot of traction in terms of the things we're doing with Hyperledger. Because one of the things that we notice with them is that, well, yeah, protocol-based trust is really cool. However, most of those large insurance companies, they want to know who they're speaking with. They want to know who they're doing business with. And that is when other protocols that are open in nature, because of the fact that they're really good for certain business models, they don't seem to work. They don't seem to work because they have this need of a known party. So if you have a need for a known party, that basically starts pushing you over the end of permissioned networks, which is one of the things that we quickly found out within IBM. And you have to take this with a grain of salt, but the thing is, IBM usually works with the really large corporations. So what happens within the IBM ecosystem might not be happening on your end. But this is the type of things that we're seeing over and over again. People want to know who they're dealing with. Thus, one of the things that we did when we started toying around with the blockchain in Hyperledger was basically try and build something where all the participants would be known. Okay, even if you want someone to act anonymously, they will still be known within the network up to a certain degree. Okay. The other question was on the type of protocol, and we just had a discussion right now in terms of protocol. So different protocols focus on different specifics. So one of the things you'll find, for example, in Ethereum, or you might find, for example, on Bitcoin, is that they're really cool protocols, but they focus on the need of ensuring value storage, okay? That's the need for cryptocurrencies. So what happens is, this is really cool and really works under certain scenarios where basically you have a feedback loop where adding more value into a protocol ensures the persistence of that business network. But the thing is, when we start speaking with the large insurance companies, they look at blockchain and they don't see any value in the thick protocol. They see a lot of value in terms of lowering cost and diminishing risk. They're not really keen on the idea of the coin. And the other thing that happened was, and this is something that we have seen over and over again across not only across the region, but also across the world, is you get regulators and you get governments, and they really get nervous when you start speaking about cryptocurrencies. I mean, it's somewhere between black magic and the dark side of the force. Because these guys are really afraid. When you started pushing something that basically states, hey, you're going to lose centralized governance on everything, they don't like it. You're basically hitting their comfort area. So one of the things that we took into consideration when we were pushing around Hyperledger was trying to focus on something else, which wasn't a coin. So we actually saw everything that was happening in insurance and other industries, and we found out that a lot of these guys, what they want to do is they want to shift assets from one end of the network to another end of the network. So we came up with this idea, a more generic idea of pushing digital assets. Now, a coin is per se a digital asset. But in essence, what we did was a simplified network that will allow the transfer of cryptographic assets from one end to the other. But this gave us a particular advantage. By using other types of assets, we could build more generic business networks that could transfer pretty much anything. Now, based on the fact that a coin is an asset, then that means that we could also do cryptocurrencies. It wasn't just our focus at that particular start of the project. So the thing about it is that, for example, when you look at insurance, there are a lot of common assets that you need to work with, and they are not precisely currencies. Stuff like, for example, client identity. And this is not only true for insurance. I mean, this is pretty much the norm across a whole bunch of different services. Actually, a lot of the consortia that I'm seeing starting up in Mexico right now have to do with customer identity. Either it be a know your customer type of thing on the finance sector, a know your customer also in insurance. You also like to govern other assets, like for example, risk provenance, the insured asset usage. For example, if you're doing parametric insurance, the actual insurance policies, proof of insurance, claims, investments. So you see, there are a lot of documents that need to, there are a lot of business concepts that you'll have within that network that you want to protect, and they're not precisely currencies. And all of them, handling them, it has a large cost for large insurance companies. So actually, we focused on doing stuff that would handle that more efficiently, do it cheaper, and not link it to the whole idea of a coin. Now, there are also third-party assets that could be blockchainable as well, that would give you an expanded network, like for example, property records, usage data, and what have you. And I won't go through all of them. If you want, you can click a picture of it. But the thing is, there are a lot of stuff that you would want to keep track of in order to be more efficient as an insurance company. And actually, these guys, they want to be efficient mostly thanks to you, because you're a credible threat to them. So when you start speaking, for example, about peer-to-peer insurance, they get worried. And when they get worried, they start seeing where they can find cost efficiencies. And when they start looking for cost efficiencies, they come to us in order for us to sell the type of solutions to them. So business networks need to focus on scalability. Scalability has been the one word I hear on your end and on my end of the world. So when you need to start scaling up beyond the proof of concept scenarios, one of the things we did in Hyperledger, mostly because of the way in which we handle cryptography, was that we developed a network where you have network node partition. That means not all nodes are created equal. You can do different types of stuff on a node. You can have an endorser node, a channel administrator, you can have a submitter node. So by fracturing the different functionalities within a node, one of the things that happened was we gained a lot of network performance. So that means that, for example, on a business network, we can actually scale to roughly thousands of transactions per second, which is really huge in terms of a blockchain. Now, beyond that, this is a question I get whenever I start discussing with guys coming in from, for example, Ethereum, and they always start asking about transparency. And one of the things that Oscar Wilde told us was that vices sometimes are only virtues carried on to excess. So, yeah, I mean, transparency is good, but there is a limit to what is truly manageable in terms of transparency. And the thing is, business networks tend to need confidentiality, which is entirely opposite to the idea of being transparent. And at times that happens by design, and by design that goes beyond the network. For example, you have fiduciary secret, you have banking secrecy, you have fiscal secrecy, and those are required by law. So if you have a network solution that cannot comply with that idea of being entirely confidential, you basically cannot do business. So the one thing we try and keep in mind when we're building solutions is you shouldn't confuse transparency with accountability. The thing is, we love transparency mostly because transparency begets accountability. But if you can do accountability by supporting, for example, non-repudiation, which is one of the basic themes behind cryptography, then you can get away with not being entirely transparent in order to offer accountability. So in order to do this, Hyperledger introduces the concept of channels. So basically, within a business network using Hyperledger, it's not that everything is visible to all participants within that network. You basically can offer different layers and have information that's only visible to, for example, 2 players out of a huge network. And then based on a business contract, a smart contract, you can actually promote and move information from being private into being public and back again into private, which makes a lot of sense, for example, when you're dealing with stuff in insurance. So the other thing that we saw was that there's no such thing as one-size-fits-all. Basically, a one-size-fits-all means that it'll look nasty on everyone. Okay? So one of the things that we tried to build within our network was we focused on doing an architecture that would offer modularity. So the idea behind modularity is that depending on the sort of business solution that you would need, you could be able to design different network topologies, okay? You might have, instead of just doing a basic schema where everyone gets a node, here you might have some people would share a node, some people would share, for example, a channel, and by offering different specialized topologies, you can offer a laser focus in terms of building a business network. We have different mechanisms of offering identity management, either centralized, decentralized, federated. We also have different encryption methodologies, different development languages. We started by kicking off with Golang, then Java, now Node.js is coming out. And also different consensus mechanisms. Now, the whole idea behind building this amount of modularity is that depending on the type of business problem that you want to solve, it's the type of solution that you need to come up. So this gives us a lot of flexibility in terms of designing how to do stuff. So what this has allowed Hyperledger to do within the insurance industry is we've actually been rather quick at delivering stuff like this, these use cases, and it is a shame, actually. One of the things I wanted to do in this particular event was offer up a brand new use case that we had, but I didn't get authorization. But basically, like 1 week down the road, you'll hear about a new development within the insurance industry in Mexico, somewhat similar to what Agustin was actually discussing, which we're kicking out probably. So what has been happening is, I mean, you do not need to take my word for it. Look in, for example, CoinDesk, and look for IBM, and look for IBM and insurance, and you'll see all over the world, a lot of the large insurance companies are already building consortia, and those consortia are using Hyperledger mostly because it enables those key factors. Now, does this mean that by doing stuff on Ethereum, you're doing it wrong? No, not in the least. What happens is, this sort of technology basically is very useful for the standard insurance companies. It'll make them more efficient. It'll make their business networks more efficient and their partner network more efficient, but that does not mean that you cannot go out there with other protocols in order to try and build brand new products. And those brand new products do have definitely a position in the market. So the other thing is, I've been speaking about IBM, but Hyperledger is an open source protocol. So if you actually see a business case where you could use the features, you can actually download the code. You can kick it up and get your own network running, and you do not need specialized hardware or anything to do it. And if you actually want to scale this up into an enterprise grade, you can do it because we, at IBM, we offer blockchain as a service. And basically, this adds a whole bunch of extra security features and extra scalability features, mostly because when you're building stuff on the cloud, you're running on the high security business network, which is actually a 57 location network where we have C14s, they're our latest generation of mainframes. This baby actually handles everything that has to do with cryptography at top speed. There isn't anything on the world that can handle cryptography faster than this thing. So basically, for example, your data will be encrypted while it's stored. It will be encrypted in memory. It will be encrypted when it's transmitted. It actually only gets decrypted at the core level when you're actually doing a process. So this means high scalability in terms of cryptography, and it's not for everyone. I mean, it's mostly for large insurance, financial sector companies, and governments. So just to say goodbye, a word to the wise. I think it was Vic that was mentioning that it feels like mid-80s. I actually think it feels a bit more like late 90s, mostly because I hear a lot of the same ideas over and over again. So word to a wise from one person that already went through this back at the beginning of the internet. It's all about the business plan. It's all about timing. You'll see 5 or 6 people with the same business plan, but only one will actually make it, and it's basically hitting the jackpot. Expect many shifts. This is a moving target, so it'll change over and over again. Also, this is extremely important, 1 gram of execution is worth a ton of potential. So if you keep this in mind, you'll be able to survive, and that is key, because in terms of evolution, the key is survival. And one of the things you need to consider is that extinction is the rule. Survival is the exception. Look at how many coins are already defunct, okay? So keep your options open, keep agile, keep yourself on toe, and basically don't focus on your tool, focus on your business model, and that will definitely help in ensuring your success. So that's pretty much my participation, and thank you guys for your patience.
Thank you, Baltazar. And a double thank you for coming here and representing a non-Ethereum blockchain. Thanks a lot. I think it's good to have you here. Do we have any questions or comments or complaints to Baltazar in the audience? I hope no complaints.
No.
We have a question here.
Short to grab a beer or something.
So this is a pretty comprehensive solution with your own technology, hardware, consulting as a service, blockchain as a service. What opportunity would small businesses have to implement something like Hyperledger? And what would that entry cost be?
Well, actually, you wouldn't have any entry cost. This is open source. I mean, if you want to pull down Hyperledger from the Language Foundation, you can do it. You can even set up your own environment for free. If you're using containers like Kubernetes, you can actually download a complete business network and have that business network running on a PC or running on a Mac. I actually made it run on a Raspberry Pi. It's really slow, but you can actually do it. So the thing is, yeah, we do offer consulting services, but you can learn on your own. There's a lot of documentation, so you don't need the professional services. Now, you can run it on any sort of platform. I mean, you could even run it on my competitor's platform. There's even Hyperledger on Azure, for example. So you do not even need our platform. So the thing is, we're doing this as a community. It's not only IBM developing Hyperledger. There are 25 other companies also building stuff on Hyperledger. So we actually need your input, and we need your ideas. And basically, you do not need us. It's the guys in the large insurance companies, usually the guys that need us. But you could also build your business network. I mean, there is no secret sauce in here. So there's definitely the chance for you in terms of competing. Actually, got a lot of friends in Mexico already developing stuff on Hyperledger, doing things like, for example, electronic prescriptions. And they're running everything on Azure. And that's using Hyperledger, mostly because of the confidentiality factor. I think there was another question here.
Yes. How IBM compare your efforts on Hyperledger versus your efforts on Ethereum Enterprise?
Well, I would say that right now, in terms of, I mean, just with a grain of salt, I'm not in charge of corporate policy. But one of the things I can tell you is there is a lot of reinforcement and corporate messaging regarding Hyperledger. So even though we're doing stuff in terms of Ethereum and we're doing stuff in terms of even cryptocurrencies, the main focus right now within IBM is basically building business solutions for those large customers. So right now that has been translated into doing stuff with Hyperledger and doing stuff on the cloud and doing consultancy services. That's pretty much it.
Thank you so much.
Nope. Okay. I think that's it. Everyone wants a beer?
More questions? We'll meet you at the cocktail party upstairs.